No one is coming to Vancouver in February for the weather. Or at least that's what one travel blog that I read stated, but the forecast looked relatively okay, or at least there would be some variety and it wouldn't rain the entire time, as I headed up to Vancouver in February for some travel photography. The plan was to get in a nice mix of outdoor hikes and urban exploration in what is probably my favorite city in North America. I'm of the opinion that if you can photograph a rainforest in the rain, it's worth getting wet to do that. It just looks so much more photogenic than when it's dry and sunny. And if you can time it to where you get some fog rolling through, that's even better. And the forecast was saying that the rainiest part of my trip and the highest chance for fog was my first morning. So first thing that I did after waking up in the hotel was driving north across the bridge over to North Vancouver to go check out the Quarry Rock Trail. This was a trail that leaves from the deep Cove town, maybe neighborhood, I'm not exactly sure, but it had been on my list for a while for previous trips up to Vancouver, but I just hadn't made it happen yet. But it was cold and rainy and foggy, and contrary to what that blog post said, pretty much exactly the weather that I was looking for this kind of hike. I passed a few other people and a dog while I was hiking and did a few little sneaky street photography style photos. I think it adds to the scene. That's sort of the difference between landscape photography and travel photography. Usually with travel photography, having people in the shots can be pretty beneficial. Occasionally, I come across a scene that feels like it would benefit from having a person in the shot, and there's no perfectly placed stranger happening to walk through. And so sometimes I'll set up the tripod, put it on interval timer, and just walk through the scene sort of naturally and basically take a selfie. I always just hope that nobody stumbles across me while I'm doing that, but I've sold enough of those kinds of pictures to editorial and commercial clients to where it's kind of worth it, and I just treat it as part of the job. So right by the trailhead is a place called Honey Donuts. This is one of the best donuts that I've ever had. Imagine a cross between a donut and like a southern super buttery biscuit. Yeah, it's amazing. If you're in the area, it's worth a stop. Deep Cove, I drove a little bit west over to Lynn Canyon Park, which is sort of like the free alternative to the very popular Capilano Suspension Bridge area, and I wanted to get the requisite shot of a really photogenic suspension bridge, but I also thought that the visitor center was pretty cool, so I got a couple shots of that as well. more places that I wanted to hit on that first day, both over in West Vancouver, which is still north of the main part of Vancouver, just a little bit further west. The first one was Whytecliff Park, and I didn't really have many expectations there. It had been pretty overcast all day, and it was, just mid-afternoon overcast light. But as soon as I got there, the clouds parted just a little bit, just enough to let some light through, and it was pretty incredible. There's a really cool rock outcropping that you can normally walk out to at low tide. I just happened to get there exactly at high tide, so not the best timing for that, but still was able to come away with some shots that I'm really happy with. Final stop of the day was Lighthouse Park, again over in West Vancouver, one of the most photogenic places in the Vancouver area. You get a nice view back towards the Vancouver skyline. There's an incredibly photogenic lighthouse. The forest is beautiful. It's just not a bad place to be if you're a photographer. Clouds came back and it rained a little bit while I was there, but it was still a beautiful evening and a nice place to wrap up my first full day in Vancouver. I love nature, but in some ways I'm also definitely a city person, so places like Vancouver are really nice because you don't have to choose, you've got both. So on the second day I was really excited to spend some time exploring around the downtown core, just kind of the main area of Vancouver on the peninsula there. On previous trips, some of my absolute favorite shots were from the pathway that goes most of the way around the main peninsula and around Stanley Park. And I figured it would be a little bit harder on this trip because it was February and not as many people out, hard to get the summery beach vibes, but I still figured I would walk down from my hotel, bring the camera for a long walk, and see what I could find. So I guess there was some construction going on, or maybe a landslide or something, but the trail was closed just as we entered Stanley Park. So I turned around, and as I did, I saw these orange umbrellas, and I thought that might make for a nice photo. So I walked up to the little cafe, and I got a shot that I'm really happy with. Glad I made that little detour. Later in the afternoon, I walked across to the other side of the peninsula and headed towards the Vancouver Lookout. It's kind of like Vancouver's version of the Space Needle. and it seemed like the views might be pretty nice from up top, so I timed it to get there right before they closed, right around sunset, leading into the blue hour, and hoped that I could get some nice shots of the city. So on my final morning, I woke up and it was pouring rain, so I just hung out at the hotel for a little bit until it stopped. Then I went for a wandered down by the water, and then over to Chinatown. It was a cool area, but it was, I think, partly because of the rain and maybe just because it was a weekday and in the morning, didn't feel like a ton was going on. I was hoping to do a little bit of street photography, but it was just a little bit dead and the light wasn't very exciting. I got a couple okay shots, but mostly I spent the morning just kind of walking from coffee shop to coffee shop and just chilling, hanging out. There is some really good coffee in Vancouver, so don't feel bad for me. It was a pretty nice morning. Later in the afternoon, I drove back across the bridge and went north again. This time I was heading towards Whistler, British Columbia. I wouldn't make it all the way, and I wasn't planning on it, but that drive, no matter how far you go, is just absolutely stunning. I had only seen it in the summer before. I was excited to see it in the winter, when maybe the atmosphere would be a little bit cloudier and moodier. So the first stop was actually not far from where I had been at Whytecliff Park a couple days previous, but I wanted to check out the Horseshoe Bay area. This is one of the big ferry stops. I also found another amazing donut, so not a bad stop. From there, I drove further up along the Howe Sound and made a stop at Porto Provincial Park. And I just always love seeing the fog in the trees. I think it's like the most quintessential Pacific Northwest view. And then there's a pier that goes a little bit out into the Sound, and the views from there are pretty incredible. And then I got a few candid street photography style shots of some of the other tourists as well.
Divide acordou na janela, tá na hora de banana e canela. Quem pisa aqui não vai querer voltar. A alegria de encontrar lar.
So the final stop of the drive, not quite sure how I ended up there, but it was an estuary right over near Squamish, and it was a nice way to end the trip. Super quiet, very foggy, no one else there. Nice to just go for a little walk and enjoy the moody atmosphere. I think I got a couple okay shots, but it was a good way to wrap up a wonderful trip. I really enjoy Vancouver, and I will absolutely be back again soon. Maybe again in the summer, do some hiking. I'd like to thank my Patreon members for supporting the channel. Without them, these self-funded projects would be a lot harder, and I wouldn't be able to do as many of them. Patrons get access to bonus videos and bonus content, talking about editing, talking about gear, making and selling prints, licensing photos. I do monthly update videos talking about what I've got coming up next, what I've been up to. Patrons also get a 40% discount on all fine art prints. So if you're interested in any of that or just want to support the channel, there's links to all of that down below. In the next month's video, I'll be visiting an even bigger city, one that I haven't been to in almost a decade now, and I'm pretty excited about that. And I'll see you all there. Bye.